Welcome to Popcorn Planet. I am Andy Signor, and man, Star Trek these days sure seems to boldly go where no one wants it to go. Oh, the latest travesty in the Star Trek universe, thanks to Alex Kurtzman, is this one, guys. Star Trek Lower Decks. A seemingly animated parody that I thought, okay, well, maybe they'll make fun of all the problems they've done with Trek of recent. But no, they're just resorting to Family Guy sort of jokes, Rick and Morty sort of jokes, which is just really odd given that they said no to Seth MacFarlane taking over Star Trek. And now he's made a better version of Star Trek with the Orville. Guys, Star Trek's in just a weird state. I wanted to review Lower Decks because we did watch it. And I thought I'd review it with two of my biggest fans. So happy to have Paul and David here. They are massive Star Trek fans. And I made you both watch this episode with me, yes?
Yep.
Yes.
I believe there was guns pointed at my head at some point.
I remember we were streaming the other night here on Popcorn Planet, and they were like, "I'm not. You can't make me watch this show." And I thought, well, that would be fun. I'm going to try and make it. What if we did a review and we all watched it together? So we did a members only screening. We watched it together. So thanks, and some other members watched it with us, and then we did a big review. But my system crashed. Hopefully this one will work. But I brought back David and Paul because you guys gave me the funniest, most honest feedback on this show. Before we get to the full review, I would love to get each of your sort of opinions on the state of Trek as we know it so far. David, you want to start?
I think it's so hard because there's all these licensing issues that are going on with CBS and Bad Robot and all that stuff that's hard to get into. And so in my mind, this new Trek is like an alternate Elseworlds in the same way the Snyder Cut is. So it's not really the original Star Trek. They're able to go off and do things, except they refuse to tell us that and just want to gaslight the audience. I would think they'd get a lot more support if they just said, hey, this is an alternate universe. We're doing alternate stuff. And we have this new idea. I think that would be great. They seem to be wanting to make Battlestar Galactica style Trek, and it just doesn't seem to work.
Right, which goes against what Gene Roddenberry did as Trek. So, Paul, what about your opinions on the state of Star Trek?
Yeah, in my opinion, there hasn't been a good Trek since probably 2009 when they tried to sort of soft reboot the universe. Mm-hmm. But yeah, ever since then, it's just been a remake of Wrath of Khan was next. Then I blotted the third movie out of my mind because it was just that bad. And then
Beyond.
Beyond, that's the one.
This is very mediocre.
It was Fast and the Furious in space. And then they've just tried to make they keep going in reverse. They keep except for Picard, which is the outlier here, they keep trying to go back and sort of retell the same stories but just worse. And so it's the state of the Star Trek universe, basically, to sum up to me, is they've lost originality. They've lost a creativity behind it. They're trying to make Star Trek for people who don't like Star Trek. That's the greatest way I can say it. They're making Star Trek for people who don't like Star Trek, and because they're doing that, they're losing their actual core fan base of actual Star Trek fans who have watched it since they were kids, like myself. So.
It's interesting. You're right. They're sort of aiming for the casual fans of Trek who don't understand why we as fans are sort of annoyed, because Gene Roddenberry was creating sort of the anti-Battlestar Galactica and start like a world in the future without any problems, without money, without racism, without all these things that, now the new Trek, Picard, etc., are just sort of completely throwing out the window in sort of this nihilistic, dark world where everyone's cursing and smoking and just goes against everything that we watched as Trek fans. And I think you said it before, David, as we've talked, like, okay, you want to make sort of a new big budget blockbuster, different version of Trek. Okay, then just admit it and own it and separate it from what we sort of know as Trek instead of keep trying to play nostalgia to us fans when we're like, this is blasphemy. This is not Star Trek. I mean, do we all sort of agree on those thoughts?
Yeah. I think that's good. And you know what? If they did this and it was good, I'd be much more forgiving. But it's not good. It's just junk.
Right. So Discovery and Picard are sort of the two big shows that CBS All Access has put out there. And Discovery, to me, I can't get into it. I did try to stick through Picard, and I don't want to spoil it, but man, I got distracted at times, which I was like, oh, okay, interesting. It was so nice to see some of the characters back. that I was sort of ignoring, and then as I sat with it, I'm like, wow, this really goes against everything that I sort of know Picard and Next Generation and all these things to do, and it just got frustrating. It was like frustrating because these aren't the characters. And then at the end of the season, they do something so outrageous and ridiculous, and you're like, what? That it just sort of sends the whole thing into like turmoil to me. So that's where the state of Star Trek has been, and now Lower Decks comes out. Lower Decks is this animated series from one of the, I guess someone involved in Rick and Morty is behind the show as well, but in this weird show that's not aimed for kids. It's not a cartoon that's like fun for kids to get into. That's going to be there's apparently another Trek that's being worked out for Nickelodeon. But this is like not aimed at kids, and it's not even really aimed at Star Trek fans, I'd argue. Yes, there's some like attempts at sort of making Trek jokes, but it's sort of really lazily, boringly done, where it's like I don't feel like it even goes to grown-ups. My biggest review and problem of Lower Decks, which is this new outlandish sort of seemingly supposed to be parody of the Trek universe, is just a lazy diet Rick and Morty clone that really just serves no purpose for the state of where we are, and doesn't at all help where we are in the state of Trek. It only sort of muddies the waters even further to sort of ask the question of, what are you guys doing? Why are we here? What is this show? What is the point of the show? Paul, let's start with you. Like, when you watched the cartoon, I know you were dreading it. I feel like it's safe. We didn't like. It wasn't the worst thing they've ever done. But do you agree? Just it's completely unnecessary and lazily done and just stupid.
Yeah, the worst thing they've done so for Kurtzman's Trek is what it's now known as for Trek fans. The worst thing they've done in Kurtzman's era is Discovery by far, but this show is just, it's unnecessary. It doesn't know what it wants to be. Like you said, I don't know who it's aimed at. I laughed a couple of times. It felt very Rick and Morty, but just didn't go to the places Rick and Morty go. So it's not trying to be as adult as what Rick and Morty is currently. And it's exactly what's problem with the Trek universe overall right now is that it lacks originality, it lacks creativity. It just, if they did satire, it would be funny. But these jokes, they kind of felt to me like someone who didn't like Trek and wanted to pay out on Trek fans. Like that's what it felt like when I was watching. I'm like, this is the sort of insults that I would expect in the schoolyard for someone who said, I like Star Trek.
Nerd.
Like, it was just, yeah, exactly. And it just felt, it felt like that. I didn't feel personally insulted by it like I did when I was watching Discovery, or like hateful of it. I just was like, man, what is this? This is boring. It was just boring. It was boring to me. And that's the sad state of it.
The characters
and annoying,
really annoying.
The characters are not likable. No one in that show is likable. No one.
Ugh, really stupid. David, you gave on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you rate Lower Decks for?
As I said in the other video that is lost in the annals of time, I thought it was absolute 0 Kelvin. I gave on it. So
it offended you the most. What about it offended you the most, David?
It's not to mention, like, some spoiler, I guess, is that they violate the Prime Directive and treat it like ain't no thing at all. Like, what's this? That kind of stuff. But just like the characters are just like being thrown randomly at us. There's no really attempt at backstory or making these people likable. It's like it's like if you watch Archer, everyone is now on the show as Archer, and there's like no redeeming qualities to anybody.
Good example.
And it's just like I was following some friends who were arguing on this on Facebook, and someone came on. It's like, why do you care? It's just a cartoon. And I'm like, no, we're now in an age when I can get good quality, great writing cartoons and great shows out there like Final Space, which is one of the best shows out there for cartoons out there that this show clearly wishes it was, but isn't. The Rick and Morty, Archer, all these things out there that are making fun of things in a good way. Like, Archer should be the template for Lower Decks, I think.
Yeah.
And it isn't. And it's just like, give me good writing. It's like, it offends me as a writer, and it also pisses me off that there's these writers getting paid ridiculous salaries to make these shows.
Well,
I'm like, I could do this better than you.
Yeah, well, I
have my friend sitting around and the table could do this better than you.
Well, I hate that review critics do. I'll be honest. Like, and I'm doing it. We're all being guilty of it now. But like, oh, we could do it better. But I say that with just like, it's so lazy. And as a Trek fan, like who I feel like it's for, like, there are so many opportunities. You're like, well, what are you talking about? There's this whole gag where they show this whole ship on a map, and they're like, just wasted. Oh, that's ops. Where it's like, I would have asked, like, what does that whole ship do? Like, where there's so many jokes you can make about the hugeness of that ship and what this ridiculous waste of space and people and where do they all sleep and how do they all eat? Like, there's just a million things you could have joked, and they just resort to the sort of quickest, laziest jokes that don't go anywhere. I mean, the holodeck is used, and it's like, to me, we were even joking, like, there's so much comedy you can do, and sort of, and especially if you won't go edgy. I pitched one everybody liked. I don't want to waste it here so someone steals it. We should all write that episode I can pitch you. But the ideas of using the holodeck in comedic ways could be really great. And they did one joke where they attempted to go there, but it's like, if you're going to go Rick and Morty and have sort of the holodeck and the Star Trek universe and you're going to poke fun of it, you got to really go there. You got to roast it, and you got to sort of make fun of it, and you got to go to some uncomfortable, awkward places to really get that joke go there if you want to attract the Rick and Morty fans. Because Rick and Morty is one of those comedies that it's like, they not only go there, but then they do a backflip over it to go somewhere you couldn't even imagine they were going to go. And so for them to attempt to like take a little piece of that style and then just give what they gave, it was more disappointing, because you're like, come on, you can't tease the idea of Rick and Morty as a Star Trek show and then give me these really lame, boring, lazy jokes. I agree, that's what offended me the most.
That joke we saw in the show was done better on the Orville. And they went further with it on the Orville, which is a live-action TV show. And these guys got a cartoon, and they just kind of hint at barely showing you something.
Right, and the Orville, as I said in the beginning, it's just so funny to see that they rejected Seth MacFarlane, who was a huge Trek fan, and literally got Fox to approve the Orville just because they're like, okay, Seth, yeah, sure, you want to make a Star Trek show? Okay, here's money. Like, they just wanted him to keep making, Family Guys. So they sort of were like, sure, make this show. So they passed on Seth MacFarlane, and now they're literally, feels like they're just resorting now to like, okay, well, let's do what Seth MacFarlane would have done. Because if they had done this right, they could have had Seth MacFarlane make an animated Family Guy joke. They could have done the live action thing. They would have had all these opportunities, but it just shows how lost they are. Kurtzman, everybody, there's no plan.
Comes down to the fact that they don't have plan, but it also comes down to the fact that they're not, like, Seth, he appeared in TNG. That's how much of a fan he was of that show and of Star Trek. And if they had kept him, if they had given him the deal he wanted for the Orville, that could have been what we had instead of Discovery. And also then he could have done this particular show. And because he's a fan, he knows what fans would find funny about Star Trek, and he could point out the stupidity in some of the episodes, the silliness.
Yep.
But what I was going to say was, it goes back to this. The cartoon, because it's a parody, it doesn't work. If it was satire, it would work, because it would be then making fun of what Star Trek is, and that's a serious science fiction. The whole thing Gene Roddenberry made with Star Trek was that he took theoretical science and he made that into a show. That's why TNG has a lot of science lingo in it. That's why they had to learn a lot of science lingo, because it attracted fans who appreciated the science in science fiction.
Yep.
in what could happen, what the way that humanity could go. And so if they were going to do this show properly, it would be it would be better as a satire rather than what it is as a parody, and a very cheap parody. And just thinking on the characters, the two main characters that you really have in this show, they're just annoying, especially the female antagonist. It felt like they were teenagers, and these are supposed to be graduates of Starfleet Academy in Starfleet, who have gone through rigorous training to become officers. They're all ensigns, and so they're in the officer pathway, and they're all acting like they're 13. The two main guys acting like they're 13. I got into Starfleet as a kid. It would be like if I was 12 in a Captain Picard uniform, pretending I'm on the bridge of the Enterprise. That's what it felt like. I was like, it's that juvenile, and it had that, and that just comes from a lack of creativity. And Kurtzman has proven he has no creativity. He's an example of that, just briefly, is in Star Trek Discovery. They're like, oh, we're going to change the Klingons. One of the most famous races in species in Star Trek that they had a big flesh out arc of in TNG, and they've changed how they look. They changed the bat'leth, one of the most famous weapons, and they made it point backwards to make it a defensive style weapon, which is against what Klingons are about altogether. And it's this just shows how it just comes from that JJ line of thought where they're like, oh, we'll take what was already there, but we're just going to tweak it a little bit, and we're going to tweak it in the worst way possible. And that's what this show is just birthed once again out of that writer's room, where they just take things and they just change them for the worst. And that's why Trek fans are just falling off. That's why, like, if you look at CBS's like data that they had to release to their board members, they're losing money. Picard lost money. Like, it lost the money because Trek fans saw what was happening. I gave that show a fair hit, especially after Discovery Season 2. I gave it a fair shot, and it just went down immediately. He was a side character in his own show. And they elevated all these other things, like Raffi, like just briefly, Raffi, she has that whole thing where
stop now.
she's got like a daughter, like she's got like a kid,
the son.
And they go to this place and they do it, and then they just stop. Yeah. They don't finish that arc at all.
None of them get finished.
Nope.
She's like, oh, I don't want to. He's like, I don't want to see you ever again.
It makes no sense.
Because she's a
They
drug.
cut at least 3 episodes out of that show, and they cut so much budget out of it because, I mean, the Borg cube never pays off.
There's so much that doesn't pay
off.
off.
Oh, we'll have a character. That guy was is in one of my favorite episodes of TNG, where they decide whether Data is like actually a being, like a being that's not a slave, right, to Starfleet. And that's one of my favorite episodes of TNG. And they bring back Maddox, who is like a primary figure in that. And I was like really excited. They didn't bring back the original actor. I don't know why, which was a nail.
They didn't even talk to the writer.
Yeah,
of that episode.
and then they bring him back. That chick, spoiler alert, that chick just murders him, and Picard's like, oh, it's all good. The next episode, he's like, oh, it's all fine. And I'm like, no.
It's even worse than that. They don't even activate. You spend 5 episodes chasing this guy down, and he dies at the end, and no one thinks to activate the doctor to do an autopsy.
The all-knowing doctor who can see it all. No. He was turned off, of course. The show's ridiculous.
She just deactivated him somehow, and he doesn't remember to tell them that she deactivated him before she murdered this guy horribly. And that's just the lazy writing of this show. It's like it reminded me of Rise. Like, it was just like, let's move on to the next thing. Let's move on to the next thing. Let's move on to the next thing. There was like no time to pause and actually stop. And that's the problem. Yeah. Like they've gone away from the episodic like villain of the week or like science problem of the week, and they've gone to this arc show of like there's an overarching arc, and then there's all these characters, but they don't write any of these characters to be convincing or compelling in any way.
You put it out. It's like it's a lack of respect to real Trek fans. I think that is a real thing where they're trying to do this fan service by pulling these characters in and then putting it to their narrative instead of like actually respecting the source material. And then, as David said in the beginning, like if you're gonna do it, then just do your own. Like and come up with your own original. Don't keep doing the fan service and disrespecting the fans.
I
want to wrap this up. I was gonna say I want to wrap up. Because the other thing I wanted before you mentioned was the fact that it's like, it says to keep it to lower thirds, so we could do a whole thing on Picard and everything else. But to lower thirds, they do all this stuff you said. It's all offensive and it's all stupid. It's all against the ways of Trek. But then to make it worse with these annoying characters, they try to make them smart at the end. They do this sort of lazy sitcom trope of, oh, guys, don't worry, they're actually good. She's really studies and she actually cares and da-da-da-da. There's but it falls completely flat in its face because it's like, I don't care. Like, don't try and give me a schmaltzy ending where like, oh, she actually does care and she has a heart. There was all a point to it all. No, just give me silly, give me funny, and give me a satire. But no, they're like trying to give you this Rick and Morty thing, but oh wait, guys, there'll be heart too. And I'm just like, get out of here. This show is stupid. It's completely unnecessary. It's just frustrating. I have no interest in watching more of them. And CBS All Access, I imagine, is becoming a huge loss because this is Star Trek is built upon this really passionate fan base, a smart fan base of a type of show that just isn't out there. That's what made Trek so great. The fact that you could do a whole episode on is Data human or a slave? Like, what other show can handle those types of topics and like get such a fervent audience to it? And I feel like they're just now we're trying to be like, well, no, we got to move with the times. More explosions, more spaceships, more curse words. Oh my God, it's so stupid and necessary. All right, quick, to wrap things up, final word, David, you want to say on lower thirds?
Can you just imagine if they had done this, got the Zucker brothers in to do an airplane/Naked Gun version of Star Trek?
It could be great. It would be great. I mean, like a Spaceballs for Star Trek. Yeah. I mean,
yes.
They never. They
so
did.
many sight gags.
Mel Brooks
and all these
gave the best Star
do.
Wars parody, but I never really got a super good Star Trek parody. But agreed. Paul, any final thoughts?
Yeah, so I was going to say, I don't know if you know, but there is actually an episode called Lower Decks.
Yep.
So again, they lack the originality. They stole directly from this because it is all ensigns and lower end officers like that do the scrub work basically.
Yeah.
And the officers have to go down. I think is it Riker?
Well, Wesley's in there too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they have to go down and actually help them to be better people. And at the end, they are better people and they're the makings of a good crew. And I was going to say, like, the thing that Kurtzman's Star Trek lacks, which every other Star Trek series has had, is it like Data was in TNG, it was Spock in the original series, it was Odo in DS9, and in Voyager it was Seven of Nine. They lack this is what it means to be a human. Like that they lack that morality and the story of like someone discovering what is humanity.
Yep.
And that's what Data was trying to find out for trying to be more human. Odo, he was trying to find out from being a changeling and having like, you know, not being confined to solid forms. Seven of Nine trying to get her humanity back after the Borg stole it from her as a child.
Yeah, like, that is when Voyager got better. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, they've lacked all of they've lacked all of that in Kurtzman's Star Trek, and now this is just like for me, it's like a meh because, and it's not as offensive to me as it is to David because, like, Discovery made me hate Star Trek so much that I am just not like anything that comes out with that brand on it now is like Star Wars to me. It's like, oh, we're just sticking Star Wars, we're just sticking Star Trek on the front of it. It's not going to be what it actually is. So for me, it's like there hasn't been an actual Star Trek since the end of Voyager. Like, for me, it's like
I will give them one. JJ's 2009 Star Trek was a fantastic attempt to reboot it. Brilliant opening, exciting movie. I thought great cast.
Except if you look at Nero's motives and his stupidity, he comes through that portal 30 years before Spock does. He could have just gone to the Romulan homeworld and gave him all that advanced technology.
I will say that one had that opening scene with Chris.
That opening scene is great.
So brilliant. There are moments of greatness in that first JJ film that I wish someone who was a bigger fan would have come in and finished and taken that elsewhere. I hope Tarantino makes his big movie because it's like it sounds like he's a fan. He's bringing some original. But I hear it's canceled. Noah Hawley's is now canceled. It seems like everything's going to start getting canceled, and it's surprising. But
well, you know that no, is it Naomi Watts? No, I think it's a different Naomi Watts, not the actor. But there's a producer that's come over to Star Trek who's actually announced. I think she put it on Twitter. She's looking at how she can reboot the Star Trek universe because like they're trying to redirect basically.
They need somebody to redirect and figure this out. Thank you both for coming in, David and Paul. Awesome conversation. There's clearly two Trek fans. I could talk about Trek for hours with them. But lower thirds, bottom line, unnecessary. Lower thirds. I'm looking at my lower third.
I don't mind the lower third. I think that's appropriate.
Lower third as I stare at my graphic. That's what they call this graphic in the bottom. That's what I call this screen I just cut to. Lower decks, completely unnecessary. Didn't need it. Just it's stupid, lazy. We only saw the one episode. I know some critics out there got to see more, but I don't want to watch more. This is not going to get as smart as it needs to. So sad for Star Trek and the state of Star Trek as a Trek fan. I used to watch this with my dad all the time. I started Next Generation is really what I connected to him, and I just loved it. It's just sad that we don't get to have that sort of heady space sci-fi anymore, especially with the Star Trek banner. I understand they want explosions, but come on, you can figure out a way to do both. Picard was an opportunity to come back and give us a nice, small little, series of, all right, back to what we want and what we needed, and they still messed it up. So it's very frustrating. What do you guys think? Tell me your comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and thanks to David and Paul for coming in. Be sure to subscribe here to Popcorn Planet for more reviews, coverage, and lots of other stuff. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.